Okay, now the recording's on for June 4th. So great. Sorry about the interruption there, Bradley. If you wouldn't mind kicking it off, thank you.
Sure. So I'm Bradley Pizzamenti, based out of Anchorage here. I have been focused on a community side in getting Zebras Unite chapter set up here. I started to talk about that a little bit last week. Had a really nice call with Erica and some email discussions with others. Essentially, what having a Zebras Unite chapter means up here is still being formed, but it's going to be along the lines of an educational and a resource mission to provide an alternative to the traditional equity structure, bylaw structure that all Delaware C Corps kind of undergo if they're going to be investable. So happy to provide more information about that offline or in a meeting and hear people's thoughts and feedback about it. Thanks, Kai.
Wonderful. Ryan, morning. How's it going?
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Witten, and my main hat that I wear is the Alaska Seeds of Change Program Manager hat. I got to tell Bradley a little bit today about my Streamline Alaska camera gear and video streaming support hat that I also wear. That one I'm still kind of figuring out how it fits and how to wear it and where to wear it, but I enjoy having that hat in the closet to put on. The things that I have been enjoying, I got a chance to join in for the Nature Conservancy call yesterday in the last session of the day, and they were talking about climate justice. And what is the role of climate justice? Is this something that we can, how can the Nature Conservancy participate in that conversation? What's the appropriate ways? And the two big takeaways that I came away from that conversation with is similar to how food can be a lens that everyone should be looking through, or at least every now and then putting the glasses on to consider the choices that they're making. Climate change and climate justice is also a lens that we should have to be able to look through and to consider the choices that we're making. The other takeaway from that conversation that I had, there can be at times this idea that there are separate streams that people are coming in, and there's a convergence where everyone is starting to understand that climate is important. And it was brought up by Ruth Miller that a more appropriate metaphor would be to consider that everyone is riding in the same canoe and we're just not working together. And so getting folks to align and paddle in the same direction is sort of the challenge of the day. And I thought that that was a really great metaphor for trying to understand how we could work better together and head in the same direction to save our planet.
Wonderful. Thanks. I'm glad you're able to attend that. Morning, Erica.
Morning, everyone. So my background, I work at the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium in environmental public health, focusing on rural climate change adaptation. So Ryan, that's a really good perspective from Ruth. I really like that a lot. And I also split my time with Blue Market in Spenard. So one of the cool things that I've picked up over the last week is that the municipality does not have a regulation for markets to buy from like city farmers, so backyard farmers, which I think really opens up kind of a unique opportunity for food production in Anchorage.
Interesting. Thanks. Morning, Laura.
Morning. My name is Laura Oden, and I'm one of the e-commerce businesses in Alaska. We make expandable footwear for people with various different foot issues. We've been doing this we launched a few years ago. We're kind of in the middle of our third year, and we're experiencing lots of big pivots. And I really like what you said, Ryan, about this idea of getting everybody to align by paddling in the same direction. That's a really great metaphor. That helps me a lot. It gives me something that feels like that's something we can sink our teeth into. I would say generally I would describe myself as being largely overwhelmed in the last 6 months to a year, and paddling in lots of directions, and hoping that eventually I get paddling in one direction. We're not dead. That's what I say every day.
Good deal. I'm glad to have you in the canoe with us today. And I've got to say that my Saturday shoes are still the best shoe ever for doing long distance RV traveling at this point. For comfort in driving and foot swelling and whatnot, you guys have got a winner there. So I'll unabashedly tell all the rest of you I love my Pandair shoes. Andy, how's it going today?
I'm here. That's about all I've got today. Yeah, long travel back on Wednesday. Yesterday was recovery day. I'm just starting to kind of wrap my head around having been out of state for 2 months. So trying to get caught up, but not much else. So I'm here.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So I'm doing the Colorado Front Range, driving around in circles in the Garden of the Gods, trying to find a good internet connection to be able to hook up today. So I'm living the travel. Carly, so good to see you here today. What's going on, and what was your takeaway from the Nature Conservancy discussion?
Hey, great to see everybody. Thank you for letting me pop in. I have not been very present in a lot of these meetings, but lovely to see you all. I was very disappointed. I did not make the Nature Conservancy meeting yesterday. I had something come up at the last minute, so I'm super glad that Ryan was able to. And I heard from a couple other folks that went, and it sounded like it was really productive. And I'm really glad they were hosting these conversations. Yeah, for those who don't know me, my name is Carly. I am this summer. I've worked with the Fireweed Collective in the past. I'm a student. Right now I'm transitioning into my summer job at the Sitka Conservation Society down here in Sitka, working as youth development coordinator. I'm really excited. We've got a ton of young Alaskan interns that are going to be helping out and building capacity and working on local issues as well as statewide issues, and a lot of folks thinking about climate and local foods, which are really going to be a big focus for us this summer. And then tying into as much as we can to different statewide local youth networks, like Alaska Environmental Action always. But yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll be here just to mostly listen and kind of try and pop in when I can and help where I can.
Cool. Thanks for joining us today, Carly. Shelley, good to see you back again today. Actually, I didn't see you last time. I'm glad to see you though this time, and glad you're back. How are you doing? And if you could introduce yourself and what's cooking in the last week for you.
Sure. My name is Shelley Roughton. I'm a land management officer for the Heritage Land Bank, which is part of the municipality. Usually I manage uncommitted lands, but I do have some really great projects, and one of those is the former Native Hospital site at 3rd and Ingra, and working out there the last couple weeks to get that started. I have noticed that people have a huge capacity and desire to want to leave something better behind. Even in this crazy world where we all think everybody hates each other and we're canceling each other, we still want to leave something great behind, and there's so many people who just want to pitch in even when it's not their job. So it's been a satisfying little path. And if you drive by, you'll see we've got our fish totes all situated ready for an orchard. So very exciting. And well, I have everybody here, and I'll put it in the chat. Next Saturday, the 12th, we are having a blessing for the site, led by Alaskans Take a Stand. We'll have speakers, elders, the mayor, and some other really great, Valerie Davidson, some dancing and singing and drumming and fire and all the great things. So we hope you can stop by and help us to bless the site for its path forward.
Sounds great, Shelley. Thanks. I'll try and take the information that you put in the chat and get it out on the social media feeds that we have and other information to try and share it to the broader network also, folks might be interested in that site and the work you're doing in that event.
An invite, a graphic that you can send out. So I'll email it to you.
That'd be wonderful.
Thanks.
Perfect, thanks. Let's see, Pasquale, what's going on today?
Good morning, everybody. Well, I think it's kind of hard to say good morning, good night in Alaska right now in summer. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, for those that don't know me, I drink a lot of coffee, and thanks to that, I can keep up with summer between working inside, all those spikes in winter that stay in the background, and then in summer you don't know if you should be doing them or enjoying outside. So right now I'm doing a mix of both. But anyway, career-wise, professional-wise, I'm an engineer that help companies in both the small day stuff, optimizing processes or just establishing the processes, as well as in the long term with goals, new markets, and how each one of the team fits into that new projection where the company should go. And that's what I'm actually doing right now. I also have a couple of companies that I have my own, and in the past, and I guess in the present, I've been involved with some entrepreneurial activities like Launch Alaska, which, by the way, good news, it got 1 million grant. That's an amazing thing. And so, yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell what I'm doing. And in the future, I will, like, as most of us say, stay buried here in Alaska for the rest of my non-life. I want to stay here. And that's why I think we should get involved in this project, and it's important for all of us, but also for those that don't want to stay here for the long term, because I think if they have a good experience right here, they will take care of this state. We need to take care of this state, but they will also be involved in and contribute with ideas and energy to make things a little bit easier for those who will stay here in the future.
All right, thanks, Pasquale. So I think from what I've picked up here, the agenda is kind of roughly right in terms of, I'm not sure if there's more to talk about at Nature Conservancy, but I got that. The summer events are out there, and then a couple just odds and ends to check in with at this point. So I guess the first thing I had on the agenda, just briefly, I did get some survey results from the APU event that we did. It was kind of lackluster in terms of kind of a mix of results. I could tell only a couple people filled it out. I was one of them, so I could kind of read my own feedback. So wasn't much else there. But just also as a reminder, if you're interested, I put in the chat the link to the shared drive that Pasquale had set up for us. So if you're ever interested in files and information, you'll find them in that shared link. And I guess just in general, I know those links get lost and you forget. Just know that there is a Google place out there if you're ever looking for information or wanting access to it. The intent is it is all there, it's all shareable, and I want to make it easy for folks to share information to that site as well as get to it. And if you ever need the link, it's available. Just ask if you're looking for it or want to use that space for something you're working on. Back on the Nature Conservancy discussion, just briefly, that whole thing surfaced because of the work that we're doing. The APU event that we had with the students and the faculty there back in, I guess, late April or May, I'm losing track of time now, got the attention of some of the board members of the Nature Conservancy. They like the discussion, the ethos of trying to think about a next Alaska and recognizing the many lenses that it has, as well as understanding the challenge of integrating our current economies with creating a sustainable future economy. And if you've worked with the Nature Conservancy a little bit, you know that they're I think of one of the more innovative organizations that are finding really creative ways of being able to take current economic drivers and use those to advance their environmental mission. And I think it's a fascinating middle ground that they're exploring. And I think for anybody who's looking at significant change in our world, trying to find that middle ground of where there are drivers that work with the current economy, but also incentivize changes that support the future economy, there's a place in there for us to be exploring, working on. I've put together a model, and I think it's shared in the Google Drive for the Nature Conservancy. When I started working with them, it's been about a year ago, looking at how to take and curate the challenges that they're working on and turn those into opportunities and potentially solutions and investable ventures and activities. And, you know, a couple examples of how they're thinking, and I offer this not to do a deep dive into Nature Conservancy itself, but to do a dive into how we might think about some of the projects and the work that we could do. One of their examples is in Southeast Alaska. They're trying to protect old growth timber. Well, what they've recognized is that a lot of the driving forces for logging old growth timber are people that want to keep their logging industry going. They're looking for jobs. There's local community impacts. So they're putting time and money and their expertise into how to make the second growth timber more attractive for logging, such that people will see that as a better opportunity than going after the old growth timber. So they're finding a way to thread the needle on supporting local economic activity and the need that we do have for jobs and keeping, you know, sustainable communities. But they're also trying to tweak the balance between, in this case, which logs get cut down. Another example, and then I'll wrap up and see if there's any questions or discussion, but another example is they're going out and they're identifying fishing quota permits that are now owned by people out of state, and they're buying them up and then financing the ability of local individuals in a local community around that fishing quota to have access to reacquiring those permits back into Alaska, knowing that if they're held by somebody in a local community, they'll be more interested in the ecological and total community impact of that quota, rather than somebody who only has a disinterested arm length access to the quota to just go harvest fish without any connection to the rest of the ecosystem. There are other examples of what they're doing around the world that kind of blend that kind of thinking, and rather than just pure advocacy for an environmental outcome, they're trying to understand the people and the community impacts of those outcomes and trying to thread the needle there. So at any rate, our discussions got their interest. That's why we got the invite to attend the strategic planning session. I realized it was kind of last minute for all of us in there. I'm so glad Ryan was able to, you know, dip his toe into that discussion. I think, you know, if you read the thread that was there, I think most all of you got copied on that. There's an open invitation for us to continue to be involved and engaged in what they're doing. And I hope any of you that are interested in some of the topics will take advantage of that invitation and continue that. But let me stop yammering for a moment and see if, Ryan, you attended. If you have any other thoughts or perspectives on that, and if anybody else has thoughts or reactions or questions about Nature Conservancy and their work or anything tangentially kind of related to that.
Yeah, thank you, Guy. It was a very interesting conversation to be a part of, and in a lot of ways, the questions that the group were asking were similar questions to what have been asked in the AKV3 conversation. You know, one of the things that the group was grappling with was how, if the Nature Conservancy in the past has tried to not be a very necessarily a political organization, how can they still address something like climate change, and what is the appropriate path to address climate change? And so it was just very interesting to hear this group sort of grapple with that question in a similar way that we have tried to grapple with being inclusive, trying to put people in, but still trying to address and make progress on the important issues that are facing our state and facing our world. Another interesting line to the conversation was what is the appropriate pace to take? How do you kind of not burn yourself out when you're working on such a large issue? And so I thought that was another interesting thing to consider. The third thing that I thought was very interesting was there was some conversation around who are the appropriate individuals to be leading these conversations, and how do we bring in more inclusive and a more diverse set of voices into these conversations, recognizing that the board members who were present were all Caucasian, they're all white people. And so how do you make sure that it is not just the same group showing up to the things? And I thought that was a really interesting question. I think that to me, it was exciting to see the group even ask that question. I think that there's a growing level of awareness that is very important.
Super, thanks, Ryan. Others have questions or comments or thoughts about that meeting, the Nature Conservancy, or this kind of general work? And I think it's interesting to see an intersection of another group that we're intersecting with that's doing similar work and probably struggling with the same kinds of questions, because I've had the same questions in my mind about where's the boundary about political activism, legislation, how do we bring in different diverse communities, and how do we balance the voice of elders and the voice of youngers and this whole thing.
Sorry, I remembered one more thing, which was that trying to decide what is the appropriate theory of change to implement or to engage with groups of people. And at what point do you just kind of say, hey, we need to bring everyone along? Or at what point do you say, well, we're going to focus on the leading, third of the group who is willing to get on board, and then we're just going to push real hard, and then folks will kind of get pulled along. Trying to decide how to engage the appropriate people, I think, was an interesting question that got raised. Kind of lining up with getting the people paddling in the same direction.
Yeah, well, my personal experience is trying to get everybody in the canoe, metaphorically, to paddle the same direction is nearly impossible. I'd be happy to have 8 out of 10 paddling in the same direction and let the other 2 drag their paddles as long as possible, and then have a discussion, either kick them overboard or finally take away their paddle.
I wasn't there for the discussion, but it brings up an interesting point for me. Ryan, is there a code of conduct drafted for the organization yet?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I'm not sure. I was only able to join with a small portion of the conversation, and I can't claim to be very familiar with the Nature Conservancy or their inner workings. But I do think that could be an interesting way to make some meaningful changes.
Yeah, I'd be curious to find out. I kind of divide those issues into 2. There's the people that you don't bring along, you specifically exclude them because they're violating the container of the group. I think that's one thing. And then there's getting enough paddlers to contribute, energy to make the thing go, which I think is somewhat of a different question, right?
Ryan, would you mind if you have some contacts from your involvement following up to ask them about that code of conduct question, see if they've got something that might be useful for us to look at?
I'll see who I can ping to ask that question. Yeah, I'll see what I can find.
Okay. Cool. Anything else on this topic? Going once, going twice. Okay, well, let's transition into talking some more about the summer discussion topics. And Ryan, I'll need you to help me out here a little bit. I think for framing, where we're at last week was kind of a proposal to look at hosting some discussions through the summer. I don't think we landed on how many, how often, but these would be potentially kind of place-based topical discussions with folks on exploring some of the challenges and issues that matter in Alaska. And I had suggested that this might be kind of a funnel to help us move towards a fall reverse pitch type of event, trying to help bring greater visibility to the problems and challenges that matter in Alaska that might this fall be used to seed some of the entrepreneurial programming and the school entrepreneurship classes and engineering project classes, and to, like I said, use this summer to just kind of explore, curate, and develop some understanding of groups and issues and directions on that, and then move it into the innovation pipeline this fall. Ryan, can you help refresh me though in terms of next steps where things kind of landed last week, and specifically, should we be diving into trying to come up with a list of events and times and topics, or was some of that getting started already? Now I'm kind of lost on the operational next step of what needed to happen from last week. Do you recall?
Yeah, I think at this point we don't have a list of times and topics. I think that there's kind of a couple of questions that we are working through. And one of them is, what is going to be the structure of the events that are held? Do we want to have it as like one central event that is held at a specific time and is sort of the event? Or do we want to have a sort of like loose conversations that are centered around topics? And then kind of having a collection place for the thought and feedback that comes back. I lean towards the loose, a more loose set of conversations, because I think that that could help us get a more broad statewide engagement in the conversations. But that leads us to our next question, which is, where are we going to collect the feedback that that we are getting from these events? And then that leads us to our third question, which is, what are the big like topics, or if we are going to have like some talking points or some framework that these loose get-togethers would have, what do we think are important framework or topical questions to engage people with? And so I think if we were to, we'll have to figure out what sort of table we want to set, and then, what are the questions or the food that we're going to place on the table, and then how are we going to collect people's feedback or thoughts that come out of the dinner conversation. If we use that food metaphor, forgive me, I think I must be hungry.
Fair enough. One of the things that popped out to me from the last couple of weeks was it sure seems to me like there needs to be an event down at 3rd Avenue, just to provide some visibility to that site, to its history, to the vision and the master plan of what's ahead. But it seems like a unique place to also have a discussion, whether it's food security, job security, land acknowledgement issues. I'm not sure we could use that venue for a lot of different perspectives. And I'm curious, Ryan, I know you've been working with Shelley and others on that. And Shelley, this is kind of your baby at this point. I'm wondering if that might not be a way to tackle this issue to a certain degree, is pick up, what might an event at 3rd Avenue look like, and kind of parse it out that way as maybe a first event to kind of work through the rest of the questions. But I'm open for going after this any way it makes sense.
I'm totally open to discuss an event. I think by August, early August, we could have something really to look at out there. So yeah, sign me up. Tell me what you need me to do.
What I'm curious in terms of the event, if there was a topic that you thought would be an interesting one to use that site as a venue for, would it be, what would it be in terms of some of the ones that we could be talking about, beyond just simply, how do we make use of this site, but what broader topic in terms of the Alaska we're trying to build and the next Alaska? What do you think would be an interesting topic to have at that site that really connects us to the past, there's a present opportunity, but then it's a pathway to some future that we're trying to create.
Yeah, and I think Ryan can probably say this better, but you know, we've talked a lot about early stage innovation, job training, sustainability, and how that can all work together at one site, and how we can serve as a hub to kind of flesh out ideas and concepts and things, and then send those out into, you know, into the different areas of the state. So yeah, I don't know how you sum that up, Ryan. Save me.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Is
Yeah.
this, I know the site you're talking about is the old Native Hospital. Is there an actual building, or is there a plan for a
No.
building?
There's a master plan for mixed use.
Okay, so when you talk about an event, you're just talking about being there on the site.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thank
We have 8 garden boxes, 2 connexes, and 33 fish totes.
Yeah, this will be a BYOC. Bring your own chair.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I ask about the status of those garden boxes?
They are available, Bradley.
I just finished building 7 of them here, but I you know, was thinking about how sometimes having materials and, you know, sets of gloves and just saying, hey, community, like, we need a whole bunch of this soil moved into these boxes, or we need, I don't know, Ryan would know what what's there and what it needs, but like, don't do the work, but bring the materials. And then, you know, maybe to Kai's point, some interesting discussions will come out of people just working alongside each other to beautify a space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said something a few weeks ago about wanting to normalize, you know, community agriculture, and it's just an amazing place to have, you know, really, you know, deeper, more meaningful conversations. For some reason, there's just something about that activity that does that. So yeah, we've got the boxes, you know, have been neglected for a good year. They're all full of weeds and junk, and we could definitely clean them up. One thing that's been talked about, and I think the Orchard Group, as I call them, is the Alaska Food Policy Council. They have the grant to do the orchard, and originally Liz Snyder, you know, was the one that conceived that whole deal, and her goal was to have, you know, the totes sponsored, or you know, for different groups or individuals, and they would come and we would have a big day where we planted the trees and we painted the totes to make it, you know, a public art kind of thing. So, what is a fish tote? It's a big, like, 3x3 to 4x4 plastic tub that they actually, like, put all the fish into in the, you know, in the industry to transport them. So they're all, you know, reused, retired, broken. You know, it's our attempt at showing, A, you can recycle these things, and B, you can grow things within them. You know, so if you're in a village that has really poor soil or contaminated soil, that there are ways you can still have, you know, fresh fruit or vegetables in those environments. But yeah, so we had envisioned this big party where we all got together and we painted and we planted things and did that kind of thing. So she is back in town from Juneau, and maybe we should have a meeting with her to envision, you know, what that could look like, and also have that as a you know, point that draws people in for that conversation.
Right, that sounds exciting to me. A kind of a work party, do something practical, help build some capacity for the site, and move along the cause. I see all sorts of ways of having a lot of interesting conversations, doing some good work, and making a lot of fun. So sounds like early August is kind of a point in time when you think that might be practical.
Sorry?
I mean,
Oh, I've also got this phone call. Oh, shoot. Sorry, folks.
we, you know, to plant, of course, you would prefer, I don't know, Ryan, I guess there are some crops we could plant in August, right?
You may be able to get something with a fast turn, like some lettuce or some radishes in the ground. Another option could be to get some garlic in that will need to overwinter. I'd like to suggest that Erica may have some ideas that could be a good fit for the market that could find a home after we get them planted there. I'm really liking the idea of having like a larger, maybe like culmination event at the site. I would love to see us have like some smaller conversations where we just sort of like spend some time on the site. And so I'm looking to host something like that, like every other Wednesday, and get some folks together. But then I do think it would be really nice to have like a big, like, hey, here's what we've been talking about. Here's what some of the ideas are. Maybe like a longer session to see what's on that. Maybe show some decent planting at the same time.
Let me work on it. I want to work on the schedule with a couple other things. The connexes will be hopefully muralized in some fashion in the month of August. And so, you know, we'll have a fence, we'll have all kinds of things coming.
So Shelley,
but let me plan. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm super intrigued. I just happened to get sucked into the Colfax, this is in Aurora, Denver, mural art district project. And there's a whole area in here that's made a thing of murals and taking street artists and muralists. And it's got a big, a large focus on diverse communities, BIPOC communities area. But they've got a walking tour around it. You can download and play while you are led around there. So anyway, that mural idea is a really interesting way I saw of really holding up the artists and the themes and the work going on. That's exciting to think you might be able to integrate some of that in what you're doing.
Cool. Yeah. Well, let me come back, maybe not next week, but the next week with kind of maybe a skeleton and framework of what it could look like and what the schedule might be. Does that work?
Oh, good opportunity. So let's circle back around on some other potential. This sounds like there's a germination here of potentially a larger event. Ryan, you're, I think, still advocating that there's some smaller events to build on the conversation and perhaps get off of always having all these darn Zoom meetings, although they're sure convenient in terms of being spread around to be able to connect with one another. Are there other suggestions either for a topic or event at 3rd Avenue or other locations, that we might be able to get out and enjoy outdoor activities and also having some good discussion?
What comes to mind for me is conversations about, ways to scale up Alaska agricultural production. Shelley, I see the 3rd Avenue Farm as being this wonderful place to have a conversation about about the accessibility of fresh produce in rural Alaska. Several of the regional tribal health organizations have gardening programs that have had some variable success. But considering that this is such an important space and a space with a lot of feelings around it, this might have a really positive impact. And there's the wellness department. You're probably already acquainted with her, but Dana Deal at ENTHC, she has done some gardening projects in Anchorage at ANMC. And there's a lot of conversation about planting what they call cousin plants. So plants that we cultivate that are somehow related to wild plants that already have a tradition around them. So Joy Britt, you guys are working with her. She can make that connection, or I'm happy to as well.
I'm wondering if anyone has any, because I'm going to kind of go sideways on this and ask about climate related issues. If there's any topics or places, physical places that would make sense to have a climate related discussion. I don't know whether that's the power generation plant of Minnesota Drive, or I'm being a little facetious, but if anyone has any thought on a place and a way to convene a discussion around climate change issues. If we were in Fairbanks, we'd go up to one of the coal-powered plants.
Okay, just to kind of seed ideas, is the idea of having it at you know, at a location to sort of get people thinking about stuff, or, you know, I guess what would be the outcome from the discussion? You know, who would be the stakeholders in that, in your mind?
Yeah, I think that, you know, we're kind of circling around on this issue without any clarity on a starting point to where the circle begins. I think in my mind, this discussion is at this point an early stage one of trying to gain better understanding of the different aspects of climate change and the way people are seeing it. But I Alaska kind of discussions, it's really centered on how these different issues are different aspects of the future Alaska that we want to try and create. So it might be discussions around how climate change is affecting the kind of economy we want to have in the future. Maybe it's affecting the kind of want to have. But I guess I want to try and suggest that these conversations all kind of look to helping people explore and broaden their awareness of what the future might hold, and then some of the challenges and paths ahead to achieve that future. But that's a pretty broad statement, I realize. I think this is, like I said, kind of an iterative process of trying to engage people in order to learn better how to engage in these discussions and how they affect the future.
I haven't looked at it for a while, but one place to start might be the Anchorage Climate Action Plan. You know, so they've got a series of goals and stuff that they've worked for the past couple of years on. And there might be something that we can build off of from there, but I'd have to revisit it again.
Yeah, that's a good thought. And, you know, one place to potentially visit would be that Bloomberg whatever lab thing that was set up over by the museum to specifically support the climate action project, and maybe just simply being able to go there and see what it is and what they're doing might be an interesting discussion and help spark some ideas. Another potential ag growing related place require a little more driving might be to get out to the Kellogg farm at APU to learn what they're up to, because I know that they've been a player in some of these discussions, and I think some of the training and awareness. I don't know much about it, but I'd be kind of interested in getting out there at some point also in order to see what that place brings and what's happening out there. I don't know if anyone knows anything more about it or how that might be a good or not good place to have a discussion. It would certainly be a way to get out of Anchorage also, and to not be completely Anchorage focused in terms of the proximity that we have.
I think that would be a cool idea. You know, and it might tie in well to some of the conversations that we have at the Third Avenue Farm, because ANTHC recently purchased APU, and are transitioning that into a tribal college. So, you know, I think there's a lot of conversation around like environmental health that are coming from that new relationship. But another possibility might also be the, what's it called? The Matanuska Experimental Farm. They recently had a couple conversations about, you know, just like what's happening where. So they might have kind of a good starting platform as well.
I'm curious. Oh, go ahead.
No, so sorry, Bradley. I was just trying to see if we were ready to wrap up or where we're going. Please continue.
Oh, I was just curious, Eric, if you know how Myers Farm is doing in Bethel. I remember seeing some really cool videos about them getting fresh veggies on bush planes out to village, and I wonder if it's been a while since I've seen that. I wonder how that's going.
You know, I don't have any sort of recent update from them. We tried to get them on board for the Alaska Tribal Conference on Environmental Management last December. But of course, December is not the greatest time to give a tour of your farm. But Ted is usually very open to, you know, any sort of conversation about what they're doing. And it might be interesting to get, you know, like the Myers Farm, the folks over in Tyonek. I think there's another farm up near Nome, one in Anaktuvuk Pass. You know, bring those folks to the table. There's definitely more. I'm missing a lot, but you know, have a conversation with them about some of the challenges that they're experiencing and where they see their growth in the future.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to be around for that discussion.
One last thing I wanted to, looking at the chat there, thanks. Anybody else have any ideas in terms of a place that for whatever reason would make sense to have a discussion around next economies and innovation, value added, regenerative type of economic activity? Is there something that comes to mind as a place you think would be inspiring to have that discussion?
Well, I'll just throw in here that, you know, somebody mentioned it a long time ago about Kincaid. I mean, the thing about Kincaid is it has both indoor and outdoor locations and restrooms, and it's open and free. I mean, sometimes it's a bit busy, but, you know, it's kind of convenient. So I would just throw that on the list. I don't know if it makes sense depending on what you're doing, but maybe any park fills that requirement. It does have the indoor.
It's also got views of Fire Island, which is a nice touch.
I'm sorry, Ryan, repeat that. It has what?
It has views of Fire Island. And
oh,
so
views of Fire
Island. Generation that is happening over there.
That's a good thought also. Yeah, and I am, you know, somewhat interested in some locations where it might be possible to also still be able to stream where we're at, so people that can't come or in remoter parts of Alaska, that we might even be able to have some events that are maybe being hosted in different areas and not, again, just being Anchorage focused to whoever can physically get within a 10-mile drive of some location and continuing that perception. So I think that's a challenge. Okay, well, let's continue to push on this. I think to some degree, this is also something I would encourage if any one of you just wants to pick it up and do it, in terms of just, you know, popping up and saying, hey, I'm going to be at X location at this time to chat with whoever wants to pop in and have a discussion about XYZ. I would encourage you to consider just stepping into that and hosting that. As I outlined in the notes I sent you the link to, and there are just some framing thoughts here to think about, whereas the discussion we had at APU was a little more around bringing people together to kind of, you know, link and leverage some of their assets and what might be done. I think these conversations are really ones about understanding how to link and leverage the opportunities that we're facing and the challenges that can become investable. That is, that they're attractive and that they make sense for people to want to move into addressing those. So looking for investable challenges, and I don't mean investable just in a financial sense, but I mean time and energy, which is sometimes the most important investment we can ask people to make. But we have to make it investable in the sense that people feel like that's a good use of their time and their energy. And so in the notes and the link I gave you, I suggested a potential outline for some of these discussions that might make sure that we, collect information about who's there and their interests, so we don't lose that at the end of the meeting, but also coming into it with some sort of framing question around a challenge topic. Imagine if, we were to be able to have, local Alaska food security as a simple example, and then having some discussion about that question and why it matters and what Alaska might be like if that challenge was turned into an opportunity that people wanted to take on. And then to Ryan's earlier point, I think each of those meetups needs to have some sort of way of collecting some data so that we not only know who attended and what interests and assets they might have in the future, but what did we learn from that meeting? What issues were on people's minds? What intersections of assets and opportunities did people discover? And whether that's simply collecting some written notes or whether that's having a Google form for each meeting that people will go and fill out a few things. I think, though, we need to have a way to think about collecting stuff real time at these meetings so we don't lose that insight. So I'd invite you, if you have any other thoughts, to add them into that link I sent you with the notes from today. But again, most importantly, just dive into one of these opportunities. If you see an opportunity, a place, and you want to take a stab at this, I don't think there's anything that will go wrong, period. It'll be an opportunity to go out and chat with some folks, and there's never an outcome from that that's not worthwhile. And I thought Laura was trying to get a word in on this, but then I saw her jump up and leave, so I'm not sure. Laura, did you have something you wanted to offer on this?
I have a question for the group.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had somebody knocking on the door. I getting ready to send out an email, tried to start getting some movement on the founder or e-commerce founder, whatever it ends up being. My general idea here is let's just start something and kind of see let it grow organically. We've got the summer to kind of get a feel for it. My question is there anybody in this group that really wants to participate in the actual development of that? Or if everybody's already booked, I'm just going to get some things going. It'll be open, anybody can participate, but I just wanted to make sure there wasn't somebody who wanted to actively participate in the, start of that. And if there's not, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm interested in participating and would enjoy that. I think there's also an opportunity for you to, see if there's anything with Linda James and the G Beta group that they've got going on, or you might find from Margot Fliss with the Upstart Alpha. There's a couple other players in that circle, but I would encourage you to just kind of dive in and
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't excluding anybody from this particular group.
Gotcha. Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts for Laura on that?
I think I'm interested in joining. I think that sounds like a really cool group of people to get together. I just don't have much bandwidth to help organize it. So if you said, hey, here's when people are getting together, show up at this place at this time, then I could do that.
That's exactly what I was wondering. Yeah, great. I'm going to get it going and people can participate and we'll see where it goes.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so for wrapping up here, I emailed, I think, all of you a little bit before the meeting, some information on the civics program. I'd invite you to have a look at that. We'll discuss it next week. It's something I'm looking at as a way to take an existing model that's been developed and bring it into Anchorage in the fall as a way of engaging people in civic related discourse and encouraging a platform of civic innovation and incubation of solutions down the road. So I hope you'll find it interesting, if not something motivating that you might want to be a part of. But I'm seeing that as something Originally, I was thinking for the civics, or for the summer, but now I'm thinking that these conversations, if we can move them along this summer, would be a way to feed into a fall set of programs. So next week, we'll touch on that. Let's come back to these summer discussion events. I am assuming for the moment that the writing content stuff is all on track in terms of the judges are looking at the submissions that we had at this point. Is there anything anybody else would like to bring up today, just as far as updates or to share with folks before we close this out? Going once? Going twice? Cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining the discussion today. I look forward to more next week. Feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. So I'm going to stop the recording and I'll get notes and stuff posted here in the next couple of days. See y'all.